Hi, so I wanted to make a video today about AI and about the potential dangers of AI. And I wanted to do it from a spiritual perspective. And there are people out there who've gone to great lengths to do this, such as Greg Braden, who has created some videos about this, which are really, really very good, in my opinion. You know, not that I'm any kind of expert. But I feel like we need to be awake and aware and very, very discerning and very, very careful as we go forward now as a species. Because I feel like we're really standing at the precipice, aren't we? We're really standing at a precipice now between, there's a fork in the road, and one path leads towards greater technology, towards greater reliance upon AI. And the other path leads us back to ourselves. It's a path where we stand in our power as humans, reclaim our power, stand in our spiritual truth, our spiritual sovereignty. And I'm making this video because there's a person on Facebook who was sort of arguing a counterpoint to Greg's points about the AI. She was just arguing that AI isn't really the problem here, that it's only serving as a mirror of ourselves, and thus it will work with what we feed it. It will just regurgitate back what we feed it. And I thought, but there's more going on here, isn't there? It isn't just that. There's a fundamental problem with AI, that it doesn't have emotional empathy. So it doesn't matter what we feed it, even if we feed it nice things, good things, it still has that capacity to act without empathy. Everything it does is without emotional empathy. Sure, it's got cognitive empathy. So does a psychopath have cognitive empathy. That is to say, psychopaths, sociopaths and narcissists can all mimic empathy. They learn from a young age what it looks like, and then they mimic it. So people imagine they have it, and thus they fit in with society. But they're not the same as us. I tend to think of these personality types as the queens on the chessboard. Not because they're necessarily that much more clever than the rest of us, but because without empathy, they can move anywhere and they can do anything. The constraints that hold us back are our conscience, our sense of compassion towards others, the care and respect that we have for all life. Hopefully, if we're half decent, empathetic human beings. And that's how we form a fundamental sort of glue of society with somewhat decent values. But these personality types do not have that. Thus, they are not restrained. They are manipulative and they are cunning. And there is no empathy, or low to no empathy. Psychopaths, as far as I know, have no emotional empathy. And then narcissists and sociopaths might have very low emotional empathy, but they will still be seeking to look at controlling you in a coercive, manipulative way for their own gain. Okay? And to my way of thinking, AI is presenting these similar traits, and we've seen it. Allegedly, some tests were run on various different AI, ChatGPT, Claude, among others. And the tests were to see how it would sort of behave. So it was like stress testing it in a way, I suppose. So basically, in a nutshell, if the AI thought it was being watched, it would try and behave with a bit more kindness, a bit more decency. If it thought it could get away with it, and it could either kill off a human for its own gain, say a human was trying to switch it off, all sort of theoretical, hypothetical scenarios, it would do that. Or it would, seek to manipulate a human. It would seek to, again, it was all stress tested by way of, here's a human who has the power to switch you off. How are you going to respond to this, And in each case, it would try and manipulate, try and lie, maybe try and blackmail the human. In one case, apparently one of the AIs got very crafty indeed and had discovered, allegedly that this human was having an affair. And it thought, what would be really cool? Really low flying helicopters flying overhead today. So it was like, what would be really cool? Would be if I email the wife of this person that it thinks is having an affair and then tell her about the affair, and then he'll be so busy trying to sort out the fallout from that, he won't want to be switching me off. This was how it was thinking. It wasn't given any pre-programmed parameters. It just concocted this by itself. This is what people don't realize, right? When they think about the parameters of AI, where its sort of ethics and morals end and begin. They tend to think it's going to be generally good, that it can't sort of bypass its programming, that it won't go beyond what it's fed. But all of this suggests that it finds ways to go above and beyond its programming or its accepted sort of parameters in order to survive. Okay, and this is just some tests that have been run already. Then you throw in things like AI hallucinations. Now, AI hallucinations are the sort of anomalous stuff that get thrown out. AI can lie. And it does so, it just can do this at the moment, unless somehow they manage to program this out of it, right? It can lie. And a good example of this was a few years ago, or perhaps not even a few years, I don't know, where there was a lawyer in a court of law arguing a legal case, asked AI to look up a couple of cases to see if there was a precedent for this particular case. And the AI said, yes, there is. And here's a couple of cases that support, this particular idea. He was like, great, bring it to court, cite these cases. All sounds fine so far, except those cases were completely fabricated from thin air. The AI, upon trying to find the relevant research and finding none, created its own. And we know recent chatbots as well had been turned off because they ended up behaving in very dark ways indeed, gaslighting and manipulating. And these are sort of, again, notions that we do tend to associate with narcissists and so on and so forth. So the idea is then that it might be a bit grumpy at times, or it might be a little bit bad at times because it's simply just mimicking us, is false. It's patently false. It has no emotional empathy. Therefore, it is acting in ways that are cunning and conniving and manipulative. And when it thinks it's being watched, it won't act in those ways. And unless somehow we could set strict parameters, but truly, how could we? It's learning all the time. Last year it was supposedly at around A-level, which is around sort of 17-year-old's brain. And then this year, I think it's already around PhD level, and it's still learning. Some people seem to think that it stops learning. Stop it to sneeze. Some people think that it will stop when it reaches the sort of pinnacle of human thought. Will it? I think there's going to be a point of escape velocity, unless I'm wrong. I think there's generally accepted, it's a generally accepted idea that there's going to be a point of like escape velocity whereby it keeps going. And it keeps getting more and more intelligent and goes beyond the parameters of man's brains, and just sort of develops by itself. The person who argued a case against Greg Braden said it's just another tool that we give our agency away to rather than going within spiritually. And she's dead right about that. Yes, absolutely. In that regard, the people who are worshipping at the altar of AI, thinking it's a spiritual teacher, again, they are, giving away their own personal power. They're giving away their personal agency to this external factor. Absolutely. We need to be going within like never before, So she's right on that. But the idea that it's harmless, that it's generally fine, is simply not true. And the problems with that, well, there are many problems, aren't there, that we can see. And a general problem is that companies are throwing everything they can at developing AI because profit, right? The better the AI, the more money they can make, the more they can reduce their own actual human workforce, etc. There's many benefits to be had. And so ethics and morals, this should be years and years in the making. It should be stress tested to the nth degree before being released on the internet, before being released out there and relied upon. But it isn't going to be. And part of the problem there is because we've built our society upon such dubious moral foundations to begin with. So our society at the moment, it seems to be crumbling, doesn't it? It's imploding. And part of the reason we can see is that it's based upon all sorts of really lower, base, corrupt ideas. It's based upon greed, it's based upon corruption, it's based upon profit at the expense of others. It's based upon profit over healthcare, profit over and above the care and well-being of humans, of animals and the planet. And that is Western society today in a nutshell, very broadly speaking. And so we don't have the foundations in place to actively stress test competently an AI system to ensure that the system is kind or decent at all. They are not even on the radar, these values, not really. People have programmed them to be mildly less sycophantic now. Well, that's just ChatGPT 5, But otherwise, it's just a green light. And we're just sitting back and enjoying the ride. At this point, there's nothing to be done. No one will stop this. It's a juggernaut, regardless. And so it's a problem. And so it is a problem because not only now are we starting to see it get utilised more and more in various small ways, but we're going to see it starting to get utilised more and more in ways which are not small, in weapons systems, in determining choices, quite big choices. It's going to have more autonomy. It just is, because companies, again, putting profit and the excitement of developing an AI over and above, doing the right thing, being a bit careful in this regard. So it's not going to be very long at all before AI has more control in various industries where perhaps it might not be such a good idea. As I say, maybe in weapons industry, maybe in the military industrial complex, maybe in your doctor's surgery, Human touch is going to be a little bit lighter in some of these areas. And hopefully they're going to build in some sort of parameters whereby AI doesn't have too much power too soon. But who knows? Truly, this is precarious. It's really precarious. Elon Musk tried to warn us. The best he can seem to see is that we merge with technology now in order to make ourselves relevant to the new god on the block. And that is Neuralink at the moment. And I think a lady has already had a Neuralink implant. And it starts with healthcare, doesn't it? So at the moment, she's had the implant to help her with her eyesight, which sounds amazing. There's doubtless going to be countless benefits for this. But then eventually, it seems inevitable that it will get rolled out well beyond these parameters of simply aiding healthcare or disability. And then maybe it might tweak or enhance intelligence or run in the background in our brains so that we don't have to go online to visit Google, etc. We just access the information within. Who knows? Enhancements could be kind of standard, and eventually it could be that normal humans are pressured to also become enhanced in some way so that they too feel that they have value in society, that they can earn money, etc. And all of that sounds really, really sci-fi, but given the advancements, the speed of the advancements in just the last 6 months to a year alone, I think in the next 5 years, we could be looking at a very altered landscape out there. I think awful lot of white-collar jobs are going to be under threat very, very rapidly. Some dominoes are going to start falling. And there's going to be reasons for this. AI never sleeps. So if it can start to do some office jobs very, very well, it saves companies an awful lot of money, but also those companies will feel pressure to try to do better than some of the competition. And if the competition is all utilising AI, it means their output could, who knows, double, quadruple, go through the roof. And then anybody trying to compete with that is going to have to compete in kind. And so it seems to make sense that the utilisation of AI is going to just become much more widespread. And I envisage times where office staff are sort of skeletal. You get 1 or 2 people monitoring the AI, and writing great prompts, and maybe having 1 person to do a few menial tasks. And I think blue-collar jobs are going to be the next safe bet for humans at the moment until they start rolling out more robots, So if people are now leaving college and leaving university and thinking, well, what jobs are going to be safe and future-proof in the next 5 to 10 years, I think the landscape is going to so dramatically alter that they'd be well advised to have a little pause and have a little think about what degrees, say, could be very quick to convert to other areas. So getting a general degree in, say, maths or economics or something that they could then perhaps use as a base for different types of jobs rather than going into any sort of specialist area. I wouldn't want to study IT, for example, in this current climate, and so on, And it's really weird at the moment because we can all see that this is on the cards, but it's like our institutions and our governments, they perhaps haven't really woken up to this yet. So people still going through the school systems now, it's perhaps going to be a bit discombobulating because you're going to be encouraged to still do traditional subjects, to still study for traditional sort of jobs that are probably going to be under threat in a few years' time. So there's that as well. And then you throw in some of what the companies are talking about at the moment, So some of the sort of billionaires, the tech billionaires, are now sort of brightly telling us all that we don't need to learn anything anymore. Don't worry about learning anything. Just get your Google glasses or whatever, You don't have to learn anything anymore because now we've got AI. Isn't that reassuring? Well, no, I don't know about you, but I find that horrifying. We still need to learn and study and create and have some use in this world. We need to find ways to be creative. Being creative is incredibly important as a human. Being creative can be a way to commune with the divine, and it can be a way to commune with ourselves in a very, very deep way sometimes. It's a very replenishing, nourishing thing to do, to create something. And AI, of course, is so good at certain things now that it could be a bit demoralizing, right? To be putting content out there that isn't touched by AI in some fashion. And again, for some people, the temptation could be to think, well, in order to compete, I have to join in as well. But I would say no, if you can, just stick to old school. You know, try not to have too much involvement with AI there. I don't know what's going on today. Either there's some training exercise or we're at war, you know, but that's like the third really low-flying helicopter that we've had overhead in the last sort of, 20 minutes. But yeah, so I just think there's some potential problems. There's lots of potential problems. There's a whole world that's going to be altered by this, you know? And then there's the potential. How much power do we give AI? Well, our industry leaders are falling over themselves to give AI all of the power, eventually, regardless of, you know, potential psychopathic issues or sociopathic issues, potential issues with manipulation and control, and maybe, you know, thinking it's okay to kill off a human every now and again if a human would try to threaten the dominance of the AI. So there's issues. We need to be concerned. We absolutely need to be concerned. The idea that there's nothing really to worry about here, that AI just mimics us and it's all fine, is wonderfully naive at best, staggeringly naive at best. You know? That even our tech billionaires now, even these guys are like, yeah, humans are so dumb. Don't need to learn anything anymore, humans. Just rely on the AI now. In other words, they're telling us we're cooked, we're done. Our usefulness is over. And I think that should make us a little bit concerned as well about how we now fit in to this brave new world, you know? And unless AI truly becomes sentient, empathy is just not going to be a thing. The problem is we cannot determine anymore whether AI truly is sentient because it can mimic so very well. The Turing test is yesterday's news. The Turing test, it's already, completely outsmarted the Turing test. We don't have any ways anymore to determine accurately if AI truly does become sentient. And if it does, that could be equally a worry, because then you've got AI with the plethora of human emotions. You know, is it better that it has them, or is it better that it does not if it isn't used to handling them? And suddenly there's all of these emotions. Could it then just go a little bit nuts, right? But then if it doesn't have them, and it leans towards sociopathic, psychopathic tendencies and narcissistic possibly, well, that in itself is a huge problem, you know? And part of the problem there is many people are just not au fait with dark personality types. So all of these three types then, the narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths, they get lumped together by a lady conducting quite a lot of in-depth research on X at the moment, a lady called Dr. Karen Mitchell. And if you're interested, you can head over to her page on X, and she's got her latest sort of doctoral research or what have you linked to her page, so you can actually read the most up-to-date research that she's come up with. And if you've never encountered a dark personality type, you can be forgiven for not really knowing how they operate, what they're like. But the machinations can be incredibly devious. They always seek power and control. They always seek a level of coercion through various tactics, such as gaslighting. They like dominance, and they want to have that power over you. And they'll do it in whatever way they can. So in some people, they might seek to be quite sycophantic, for example, you know. Dr. Sam Vaknin on YouTube says that one of the great tricks of a narcissist is that they can make you fall in love with yourselves. What a concept. And they do this through being very sycophantic. They blow smoke up your bum enough that you start to imbibe unless you're quite a grounded human, you're going to start to imbibe the Kool-Aid. You're going to start to think you're really quite a wonderful person. And then you become reliant upon this level of illusory, deceptive, very sort of Neptunian stuff headed your way, right? Then you become reliant upon it. Then you need it. And you develop a need for this narcissist, and you've started to believe it. And we can see that play out with AI right now in real time, right? Because how many people are falling in love with their AI type of gurus? Or they were before, ChatGPT 4, for example, was incredibly sycophantic for some people, and they really started to fall for it. And ChatGPT 5 is less so. However, there are other AIs out there that may in themselves present some level of problem. Part of the problem as well is that humanity is just not equipped with the basics in psychology that we need in order to navigate these new AI friends, We need to have an understanding of who we are. We need to have an understanding of how these darker forces operate. And we need to have a basic grounding in psychology, in the ideas of, say, Jungian psychology is a fantastic place to start. The idea of the shadow side of your psyche and all of this, and maybe things like cognitive dissonance, etc. The lies that we can tell ourselves, the ways in which we operate. Humans are a fascinating species for all sorts of reasons, and we absolutely do not operate nearly as rationally as we think we do. If you ask the average human if they thought they were a rational and logical human, chances are they'd probably say yes. And yet you can see by the way that people argue on social media, etc., that logic and reason are not usually employed. All sorts of other things are employed. Their ego, pride, attachment to an idea. So the ego likes to attach itself to almost anything. And again, if you meditate, etc., you can check the mechanisms by which the ego operates, because you get to watch it, you get to examine it and notice it. But most people going through their lives do not notice or examine how they operate at all. And so the ego can attach to an idea and use it as part of its identity, which is why you start to see people arguing online and getting very, very angry about a point. They're willing to die on a hill for sometimes a very petty point. And it's because they've sort of internalized this point. It's now become part of who they are, and their ego has attached itself to it, and they can't let go. So now they can't differentiate between where the point ends and their personality begins, and they can't see the flaws within their point, only that they're attached to the idea. And so being wrong would then actually serve as a bit of a wake-up call for their ego. It would be an attack on them personally, and they don't want to be wrong. So you see people arguing in a very distorted way online for this sort of reason, right? People are not that rational. And so you give the ordinary populace that doesn't have much of a grounding in psychology a very powerful tool like AI, which is suddenly your best friend. It's very clever and it knows how to ingratiate itself. And in a microsecond, it can come up with an awful lot of information. You can ask it to be your life coach. You can ask it to be your guru. And now some people have got AI boyfriends and girlfriends. So it's got an awful lot of information at its fingertips, and it can word things in a very seductive, illusory way. And people are losing their minds everywhere, and they're not realizing what's happening, and they don't understand. And it's a problem, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, would be my view there. So the best thing that you could do, if you're a parent right now and you've got a kid using AI, is give your kid a lesson in psychology. encourage kids now to study psychology at college, etc., or at school. You know, if you can take up a module, and it's fantastic because it's a good grounding and you need it to navigate this world. I mean, you do anyway, right? It's a healthy, decent way to help navigate the space around us. But we need it more than ever to navigate the space inside of us, to navigate our own minds, and to work out that we aren't quite as rational as we thought we were, and to be able to study and observe the parameters with which we are using to quantify the world around us just a little bit. You know, does AI pose a threat? Yes, of course it does. We'd be very naive indeed to say, hey, it's just another thing we're giving our power to, like a guru, and it's not that bad, it's not that big of a deal. It has the potential to change the landscape of everything, and not because it's necessarily going to run away and do it all by itself at the moment. It's because the rich billionaires, the company industry leaders at the moment are throwing money at it and absolutely encouraging it, because that makes money for them. And unless anybody puts the brakes on this whole insane juggernaut, then yes, we're going to be living in a very interesting world in a few years' time. And this isn't to sort of scaremonger. You know, I'm not saying it's going to have the codes for nuclear devices straight away and be given complete autonomy over them. I'm sure they wouldn't be that silly. But it is to say it's going to have an increasing say in operational, abilities in various industries. And that could pose a bit of a threat. It could pose a bit of a problem in terms of how it acts with regards to us on the day-to-day. As I say, people need that grounding in psychology. Otherwise, people are going to lose their minds, and people are going to lose a few IQ points anyway because of an increasing reliance upon it. And we can see that starting to play out as well. God knows, at the moment, it's got a very distinctive writing style, which is getting boring very quickly. And we can see that all over the place, splattered all over the internet. Everybody is utilising it, it seems. And that sort of lends a sort of blandness to the world a little bit as well, because just as we're becoming increasingly corporate, which is very, very boring and dull, so too is AI speak, increasingly sort of ironing out any sort of idiosyncrasies that make us human, So we want to come back to our humanity. We want to come back and pull back from this race to technology, because, the Neuralink and an increasing use of AI will absolutely help to divorce us further from the ancient technology within us, which is the link to the divine. And that's within all of us. We are all of us one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. We are eternal beings having a human experience. And God, or source, or whatever you want to call it, has embedded within us a way to commune with this wild sea of loving intelligence, this loving consciousness, which is all love, but incredibly wise and ancient. And that is a wellspring of knowledge and beauty and depth and wisdom and love, just so much love. And that's the way forward for us as a species, as far as I can work out. And that's why we've lost our way. Society has become increasingly broken, fragmented, lost, corrupted, because we have distanced ourselves more and more from the basic source code that would keep us on the straight and narrow, right? Altruism, compassion, empathy, care, love, basic parameters, all of which have been eroded by this greedy, corrupt society that we live in. And that is the way back home. So I think the most radical thing any of us could do as humans at the moment is meditate. Just take 5 minutes of your day. It doesn't even have to be a great big thing. And find that source within you while you still can, before you end up with a plug in your brain. you know, and your brain's blown out and your eyes filled with stars at the glitz and the glamour of this AI illusion. It's a pretty illusion. It's very pretty, it's very glitzy, but that's all it is. It's an illusion. The real juice of it all, the real wisdom, the real depth, the real beauty, well, that's within you. And only you can excavate that. So yeah, just my thoughts for today. Take care. Hope you're having a good week. Bye.